Hey, I'm D.Ramirez for Raven Studios. Quick tip, saturation is the secret to making your kick drum punch. I'll show you how to add just the right amount so it hits harder, sits in the mix and grabs attention. So let's dive in. Here we are in Ableton. Now, this is a small part of a much bigger course, and you'll be able to find the full course on the Raven Studios website, where I dive deep into the art of mixing. You can see here that I've got quite a lot of plugins on the plugin chain here, on the channel strip, so to speak. That's where I go into more detail on the Raven website. But for now, we're just looking at saturation, the saturation part of it, in relation to the kick drum. So let's get into it. Now, I'm just going to play you the kick drum here. Very short, very sort of transient, very sort of nondescript kick drum. What I want to talk about is saturation. Let's first start with this little bit down here. Now, down here we have, you can see that we have the decapitator. And what we've got is we've got the utility going into it and going out of it. Now, why am I doing that? And a lot of people ask me this question. Well, if we look at the waveform of this here, you can see that this is sort of sitting at, well, usually the sampled waveform is usually around about, is usually like that. It's sort of maximized and mastered. That's what that looks like. Now, consider that as the input level into the decapitator. Now, the problem is with the decapitator, it works in an analog fashion, which requires a level of -18 or thereabouts going into it. Now, what we have to do then, because if you don't put the utility before and after, I'm going to turn these on, turn the utility off, so you'll hear what I mean, is because the level going into the decapitator from the level of the kick drum is actually at, it's at full level, it's above -18. So you are distorting the decapitator before you even add drive. Look at that, just by adding a tiny amount and you're starting to get just real heavy distortion. So to get around that, what we do is we go back here, we then add a utility before it to bring down the level of the kick drum by -18, like that. And then because it's so low, we want to bring the level back up again of +18 there afterwards. So what we can do is we can then add saturation to it. Bringing down the output as well, without it distorting going in. So you can add the required amount of saturation to it without it distorting. So that's in this instance of the decapitator only. If you were to use the Ableton saturator, that does not work in an analog fashion, and you can put in an input as loud as you want to. Now, these actual plugins are what's known as non-linear, and they are input level dependent, meaning if you drive the input going into them, they will, and I'm going to draw you a diagram for this. So you've got your saturation there. So if you drive an input like, this is maximum 0 dB. If you drive an input, say there, you will get a different sound of an input, say there, going into it. Because what this, they are non-linear input level dependent plugins, which means that, an input level like this we won't saturate as much as an input level like this. Okay, hope that sort of explains it just a little bit. Now, so with that said, in the decapitator only, you can now start to add saturation. Why saturation? Well, I think if I, again, draw you a diagram, give you a little bit of an explanation of what saturation is. Saturation is it's a distortion, a form of distortion. And what distortion does, it enables you to actually add frequencies. So if I start with my draw tool here, and I'll draw you a little diagram over here. So say, for instance, you have a very clean kick drum that looks like that, okay? So that's your transient there. And it's a very clean sort of, these are your frequencies sort of there. What saturation will do is add in extra harmonics along the frequency range, depending on how much saturation you give it, how much you distort it essentially. So you can add in these extra frequencies like this, okay? You add in these, and these are what's known as harmonics. These can be odd or even or uneven harmonics, depending on the type of saturation that you use. Now, what that essentially does there, you can see that it actually gives you more frequencies. the volume remains the same. In fact, in some instances, it actually brings the volume down because you're chopping off the transient of the kick drum there. Say, for instance, that kick drum went up there. You could chop some of that off. So you're bringing the peak level down. But what you're doing is you're adding these extra frequencies here, right? Which then makes it sound louder. It's the perceived loudness of the track. Give it. And Daniel Wyatt, this is where I sort of learnt about saturation. He's the mix engineer for, he used to mix Madonna and master Madonna records, and so he knows what he's talking about. He calls it the difference between white bread, which is, nice in itself, but then you toast white bread, put it in the toaster, and it gets all brown and crunchy. You put some butter on it, and ooh la la, it is a beautiful thing. It's the same thing, but you're adding this extra dimension to it. You're toasting it. So let's call saturation toasting your signal, okay? And in the case of a kick drum, you can get extra frequencies. You can bring out the frequencies there, and you can also get extra volume, perceived volume out of it, because it sounds like there's more in there. You're actually adding to the signal. Okay, so let's have a look in practice. Now, of course, you can drive it. What you must also do as well is when you're driving the signal is be aware of the output. Now, I'm going to show you how I would look at this, and you're going to use this megascope, Oscilla's megascope here. Now, we can see here without the decapitator on, this stuff on here. That's the level of it. You've got full level there. So just to make sure that we are not going louder or quieter, what we're going to do here is we're going to make sure that as we add saturation, we are going to adjust the output level. Right? So look at that. You can see there that I'm sort of going over. Let's bring that down. So adjust the output level to compensate for the extra volume that it adds when you saturate it. Now, some plugins have an automatic sort of volume matching thing, but Decapitator does attempt to do that with the auto switch, but I find it's not that accurate. So look, I'm bringing down the output. As I saturate it further, I'm bringing down the output. Right, so let's look at the different techniques you can use to saturate. This is the full frequency saturation here, which is basically you're driving it. Then you can choose the style. You've got, let me put that there, you've got very different styles and sounds of saturation because you've either got the even harmonics, the uneven harmonics, or a mixture of even and uneven harmonics that you're adding to it. So dependent on the style that you choose, you get a different sound, okay? So when you're using Decapitator, it's always worth going through and just checking the one you like the most. In this instance, I think T is particularly nice. I like that, what that's doing. Listen to that. You're toasting it. You're just giving extra frequencies. If you want to look at the frequencies, you can look at it on a spectrum analyzer. Now, I'm not going to go into that because that's where I go into more detail on the Raven website, remember? So I'm just talking about saturation in this instance. So that is one form of saturation there, like that. Now, on Decapitator, you've got some tone controls, which are basic filters. You've got a high and a low. A high cut. You can take off some of those crispy frequencies that come on, especially with like this one. Okay, and then the low is obviously the low cut. So, but what we've got is this beautiful thing called the thump, and the thump creates a resonant bump at the cutoff frequency, which actually gives the impression of not only does it cut out some of the low frequencies, but it boosts the bass. So if you put thump on, you should be able to go. And you hear there's a point where it starts to snap in and gets a bit bassier. Like there, so it takes out those low frequencies but gets bassier. Now, what if you think, okay, I like the sound of that, I like it, but it's sort of losing some of the transient, it's losing some of its sort of magic. The kick has been squashed and killed, so to speak. Well, you've got the mix control, and this where it allows you to be able to do parallel saturation. Okay, parallel saturation is often preferred because you are retaining the dynamics and the transients of the kick drum. You're keeping the source and the essence of it, but you're adding to it. Not only you're adding these extra frequencies, but you're sort of in parallel. You're adding the toast, there on the side. So you've still got like the best of both, so to speak. A bit of the original, but then a bit of the toasted version. And we can do that. And there's another way you can do that. You can punish it, which is basically sort of tenfold saturation. I don't know how much it is. Please tell me in the comments how much it sort of, I think it just pushes the input level. So you're getting more saturation. So listen to this. Awful. But let's pick a saturation type we like. Okay, let's bring up the high cut so we can listen to that. That's pretty hardcore. That's normal. Now, on its own, that sounds pretty disgusting, right? You're not going to really use that. But what we can do is we can go, let's get it to sound as sort of nice as we can. I like that. I've taken off some of those extra crispy high frequencies. And then we're going to mix it in. Okay? And what that does is has the effect of just having a bit of both. You've got the original kick, but you've got the toasted kick there. Look at that. Now, the next thing we want to look at as well is the level of the kicks. If I sort of bring these out of the way here, so let's do that. Let's take a look at it. Look at the level there. It's at minus 1.85 with the saturation on. With it off, it's exactly the same level. But I don't know if you notice, you can, if I turn it on, off, it sounds to me a little bit louder with it on because it's got these added frequencies in there and it gives the perception of perceived loudness. So it's kind of, sometimes you can actually reduce the level and with it sounding louder. In this instance, we're sort of at the same level. And then finally, what I want to show you as well is this little track that I've put together of how we can sort of see how it works in context. So this is the track. Okay, so the kick drum without sits like that. For me, it sort of sits at the back, and what this allows you to do by adding saturation is bring it forward. Off, on. Now you can see here, I've got lots of other processing added. I've got some EQ, I've got some compression, I've got a transient shaper, and these are what I go into more detail on the Raven website. So this is just the saturation portion of it. Now, of course, there are other saturations that we could use. This, I'm just going to keep this video short and sweet because I just want it to be a quick introduction to a single band saturator, which is Decapitator, and how we can sort of use it in slight different ways on a kick drum to just bring a little bit of toast to the kick, which then brings it forward. Okay, hope you enjoyed that. Please leave me some comments in the comment section of how you like to use saturation, any saturation plugins that you like to use, any sort of techniques that you like to use, in particular to the kick drum. Because again, you know, we can all learn from this, including myself. I just wanted to show you a little basic overview. Remember, if you want to see more about this, and if you want to get the full detail of how I would mix a kick drum from start to finish, please head over to the Raven website where I go into much more detail. And remember, if you like these videos, please don't forget to subscribe and hit the like button. See you in the next one.